The woman the film did not show. The film The Man Who Lived with the King has passed 15 million admissions. The story of Joseon's tragic King Danjong has moved the country to tears once more. But watching that film, some of you may have found yourselves asking what happened to Danjong's wife. The film follows the time Danjong spent in his place of exile in Yeongwol with Aum Hongdo and the villagers who became his last companions. But the story of the woman who stood at a bridge in Hanyang that day and said goodbye forever, that story is not in the film. Her name was Queen Jeongsun of the Song clan. Let me begin with two numbers. Her husband died at 17. She lived until 82. Years lived as Queen 3. Years lived alone after his death, 64. She was parted from her husband at 18. She died at 82. She outlived King Danjong by 64 years. Today we tell the story of the woman the film did not show. And throughout this video, we will clearly distinguish between what is documented in the royal annals, what is reasoned reconstruction based on those records, and what is legend passed down through the centuries so that you can judge for yourself where history ends and storytelling begins. Content marked as record in this video is based directly on the Joseon royal annals, the Danjong Sillok, Sejong Sillok, Danjong Sillok, Danjong Sillok, and others. Content marked as legend is not found in the contemporary annals. It comes from later collections of tales, family oral traditions, and local folk memory. Chapter 1. The girl who became queen the bride Prince Suyang chose. To tell the story of Queen Jeongsun, we have to begin with why she became queen at all. The story starts there. According to the Danjong Sillok, the person who most forcefully pushed for the young King Danjong's marriage in 1454 was Prince Suyang himself. Suyang argued that His Majesty has ascended the throne at a young age without the protection of a queen mother above and without the careful assistance of a virtuous queen below. How can it not be urgent to welcome a queen and seek an heir? This is recorded in the Danjong Sillok. Was this genuine concern for his nephew? In 1453, Prince Suyang had already seized power through the Gyeojongnan coup. He had his eyes on the throne. For a man concealing such ambitions, ensuring his young nephew went through the formal process of marrying a queen served a purpose. In the first month of 1454, a formal bride selection was held at Changdeok Palace. The daughter of Song Hyun-soo was chosen as the final selection. She was formally invested as queen on the 22nd day of the first month. She was 14 years old, Danjong was 13. One important fact must be noted. Song Hyun-soo, Queen Jeongsun's father, was close to Prince Suyang. The man who would devastate her life and the man who gave her the position from which that devastation would come were the same person. The Danjong Sillok describes Queen Jeongsun as gentle and frugal in character, fully worthy of preserving the royal ancestral shrines for generations. This marriage ceremony is also considered one of the early examples, in which Joseon's formal royal consort selection process was conducted in a relatively systematic way. Earlier queens had also gone through selection procedures, but this occasion represents a more institutionally organized form of that practice. Did the 14-year-old girl understand what it meant to become queen? But the time she spent as queen would prove very short indeed. Chapter 2, The Farewell. Her husband dead 4 months later. In 1455, Danjong abdicated. The 15-year-old became Queen Dowager Woodeok. She was still inside the royal family circle. Then in 1456, the Six Martyrs incident broke. According to the Sejong Sillok, Seong Samun, Bak Pengyun, and others were caught planning to restore Danjong and were executed. Sejong used this as the pretext to demote Danjong to Nosan-gun. Simultaneously, Queen Jeongsun was demoted to Gunbuin and expelled from the palace. This is recorded directly in the Sejong Sillok. In 1447, Danjong was sent into exile at Cheongnyongpo in Yeongwol. Danjong's exile itself is recorded in the Sejong Sillok. However, the specific place and scene of his final farewell with Queen Jeongsun, the story of them parting in tears on a bridge over the Cheonggyechon, is not directly recorded in the annals. The story that they parted at Yeongdo Bridge on the Cheonggyechon is a later tradition. The name Yeongdogyo Bridge of Eternal Parting was also a name given in later times. That the two parted somewhere in Hanyang is certain, but the specific location and the scene as described come from oral tradition rather than the annals. There is a reason the annals are silent here. In Sejong's era, even mentioning Danjong's name was dangerous. In that silence, people created stories to remember what could not be written down, and those stories became tradition. Whatever kind of farewell it was, the man who left did not return. Danjong was sent to Yongwol in the 6th lunar month of 1457. On the 21st day of the 10th lunar month, he died at 17. The Danjong Sillok states he hanged himself and was buried with appropriate rites. This record is widely considered unreliable, as it was written from the perspective of the king who had usurped the throne. Later sources describe a servant who used a bowstring to strangle Danjong. Whether Danjong died by self-inflicted hanging or was killed under Sejo's orders has been debated for centuries. No record constitutes a direct contemporary eyewitness account. From the farewell in the 6th lunar month to Danjong's death in the 10th 4 months. Queen Jeongsun was 18. In the same year, Danjong's uncle Prince Gumsong was discovered in another restoration, attempted and executed along with Queen Jeongsun's father Song Hyunsu. Seju Sillok, her husband gone, her father executed, her own status reduced to that of a state slave, though by Sejo's order in the same year, she was not to be made to work as one. 3 things in a single year. She was 18. Chapter 3. The Queen Who Became a Slave, Sejo's Complicated Order. Queen Jeongsun's status was now that of Gwanbi, a state-owned slave, but she was not put to work as one. From queen to queen dowager, to prince's consort, to slave and status 3 demotions. Yet Sejo's decree was not straightforward. The Danjong Sillok records that Sejo issued the order. Although her status is that of a slave, she shall not be put to work as one. He sent her to Jongjeomwon, a convent where widowed concubines who had left the palace could live out their days in Buddhist practice. Why this particular order? The sight of a former king's queen wandering the streets or becoming another nobleman's slave would be a political liability for Sareung himself. But he could not harm her either. Whether this order was protection, confinement, or abandonment is impossible to say, but it determined the shape of her remaining 64 years. Sejo subsequently offered to provide Queen Jeongsun with a house and food. The annals record that she declined. However, the background and intent behind this declination are not made clear in the records alone. Whatever the reason, the fact that she did not accept what Sejo offered is preserved in the record. Whether this was a deliberate act of resistance against the man who had killed her husband or something else entirely, the record leaves that interpretation to us. For what came after, we depend more on legend than on the annals. It is said that Queen Jeongsun built a small grass shelter near Cheongyongsa Temple east of the city, and that she and her remaining attendants survived on alms and on the income from dyeing cloth. The well site of Jeongeon, the spring she allegedly used, still exists today. This is not in the contemporary annals, it comes from legend and oral tradition. How she actually lived cannot be confirmed with precision. Note, cloth dyeing livelihood is not in the Joseon royal annals. The Danjong Sillok does record that Queen Dowager Jeonghui ordered food and clothing to be provided to Queen Jeongsun, which suggests some institutional support did exist, at least in her later years. It is also said that neighborhood women would bring food to her, but that Sejo had forbidden this. So the women organized a secret market at dawn, just for women, to pass food to her discreetly. A stone marker reading Women's Market Site still stands near the Yongno Flea Market in Seoul. This too comes from legend rather than the annals. Legends survive for reasons. The story of nameless women opening a dawn market to circumvent a king's edict is a story about resistance from below. The kind of resistance that leaves no official record. That is precisely why people passed it down. Chapter 4-5, Kings Change. She was still alive. The most remarkable thing about Queen Jeongsun's life is not simply that she lived a long time. It is the number of kings who came and went while she was still alive. The year she was parted from Danjong, 1457, was the 3rd year of Sejo's reign. After that, Sejo died 1468. Yejong ascended, then died after just over a year. Seongjong reigned for 25 years. Nosan-gun was deposed and Yeongjong took the throne. Queen Jeongsun lived to see all of it. Through the reigns of Sejo's widow Jeonghui, Yejong, Seongjong, Nosan-gun, and Yeongjong, throughout every one of those reigns, she was living near Sungindong, east of the city wall, in the same city. The Danjong Sillok records that Queen Dowager Jeonghui, Sejo's widow, ordered that Queen Jeongsun be provided with food and clothing. The court knew she was still alive and could not entirely ignore her. The annals record that in her old age, Queen Jeongsun came to stay in the household of Jeongmisu, Danjong's only remaining nephew. 2 people devastated by the same man, leaning on each other. Jeongmisu died in 1512 at 56 without an heir. Queen Jeongsun was already past 70. During all these 64 years, it is said that Queen Jeongsun climbed the hill behind her home. Every morning and evening, weeping and gazing east toward Yeongwol. That hill came to be called Dongmengbong, Peak of Gazing East. This is from legend rather than the annals. Many scholars view this as a symbolic story that compresses the grief of 64 years into a single image. King Yeongjo later had the characters for Dongmengbong carved into the rock of that hill himself, and built a monument at the site of Jeongjongwon, where Queen Jeongsun had lived. A king put a woman's grief into a name and memorialized it in stone. The rock bearing Yeongjo's inscription was destroyed when the area was used as a quarry during the Japanese colonial period. A small pavilion called Dongmangjong was built nearby in 2011 to mark the site. Chapter 5, Sareung, the reunion that never happened. In 1521, the 16th year of Yeongjong's reign, Queen Jeongsun died at the age of 82. Her status at death was still that of a prince's consort, not a queen. Her funeral was conducted according to the rites for a prince's consort. Her tomb was established in the ancestral burial ground of the Haejujong clan in what is now Namyangju. The inscription on the tombstone read, "Tomb of Lady Song, consort of Nosan-gun," not a royal tomb. The consort of Nosan-gun, 64 years. 5 kings came and went, and her tombstone bore not the word queen, but consort of Nosan-gun. That was the official name given to her life. But the story does not end there. 177 years later, in 1698, Danjong was finally restored to his royal title. The Danjong Sillok records that in the same act, Queen Jeongsun was also posthumously reinstated as queen. The name given to her tomb Sareung. Sa-si means to yearn, to remember. A name exactly suited to the life of a woman who spent 64 years thinking of the one who was gone. When the restoration came, there was a debate about whether they should be reinterred together. The proposal was set aside. The 2 tombs had been in their respective places for so long, and reinterment was already difficult on traditional and institutional grounds. The position of royal tombs carries centuries of its own history, and the ritual protocols of Joseon were not easily overridden. Both tombs are now included in the UNESCO World Heritage designation of the Joseon Royal Tombs, inscribed in 2009. UNESCO designation is a further layer of barrier on top of these existing constraints. As a practical matter, reinterment is now impossible. But in 1999, a small act, the Namyangju Cultural Foundation took a pine tree from the grounds of Sareung and transplanted it in front of Danjong Sillok in Yeongwol, naming it Jeongyeong-sung, the spirit pine. Let their souls at least be together. That pine tree still grows in Yeongwol today. It is said that the pine trees at Sareung grow with their branches turned uniformly eastward toward Yeongwol, toward Jangrung. This is from tradition rather than the annals, but it was the story behind the decision to transplant the Jeongyeong-sung. Chapter 6, the woman whose record was erased, silence as testimony. Why are the contemporary records of Queen Jeongsun so sparse? After Sejong took the throne, everything connected to Danjong became a political taboo. Because Sejong's descendants continued the royal line of Joseon to officially remember Danjong's deposition, and death was to shake the foundation of royal legitimacy. Queen Jeongsun was erased along with him. Silence is itself a form of testimony. The absence of the record does not mean her life was nothing. It means there was an era in which leaving such a record was dangerous. A scholarly paper that examined Queen Jeongsun's song as a distinct historical subject, one of the few to do so, opens with this sentence: while there has been considerable interest in the male narratives connected with the Gyeyu-jongnan, Danjong, Sejong, the 6 martyrs, almost nothing is known about Danjong's Queen Jeongsun's song. This was written in 2016, less than 10 years ago. It was only from the 17th century onward, as the movement to restore Danjong's reputation gathered force, that accounts of Queen Jeongsun began appearing in any volume. And when the restoration finally came in 1698, it gave her tomb a name she would never have heard in life. The ways in which she has been remembered fall into 3 categories. In official state documents, she appears as a figure that reinforces the narrative of loyal restoration. In the writings of educated men, she appears as a means of criticizing Sejong obliquely. And in oral tradition, she appears as a figure of pathos and sorrow. In none of these versions does her own voice survive. That is the other meaning of living as a woman in Joseon, to have your name recorded in history while your voice goes unrecorded. The woman who waited longest in all of Joseon. To those of you who have seen The Man Who Lived with the King, or plan to, one thing before we close. The film tells the story of the time Danjong spent in Yeongwol with Aom Hyungdo and the village people around him. That is the story the film chose. And alongside that story, There was another 64 years lived beside the Cheonggyecheon stream in Hanyang. From queen to queen dowager, to consort, to slave in status. 3 demotions, and through all of them, she never left. She declined the house Seo offered. She declined the food Seo offered. Queen Jeongsun of the Song clan. Joseon did not remember her as a queen. Her tombstone bore not the word queen, but consort of Nosan-gun, and it took 177 years for her to receive her name back. But people remembered her as the one who waited. And the name the world gave to that waiting was Sareung, to yearn, to remember. Sareung. The reunion that never happened in death. But in 1999, a pine tree from the ground where she rested was carried to stand before Danjong's tomb. Jeongyeong-song, so that their souls at least might be together. In the next episode, we will ask why it took 241 years for Danjong to be restored, and how King Sukjong managed to restore him without undermining the legitimacy of the line that had ruled Joseon for all those years. We hope to see you then.